Hey there. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. I'll say that again. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast. Oh, yep, with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Now it's time for the Big Bad Broadcast.
And my dad and uncle have told me about they had really some amazing singers perform their songs. Kristen Chenoweth sang Feed the Birds at a Hollywood Bowl to a packed audience. And of course, Julie Andrews originally, Dick Van Dyke, everybody, Johnny Mathis sang their song. Everybody sung their songs. But the highlight of their life, I know, and they don't talk about it a lot, but was when Wayne's Merge performed that song for them at the Coco Tiki Lodge. I think it really kind of brought their whole career full circle, and they were able to, really fulfill a lifelong dream of having a true master perform their work.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now to welcome you to Bitchin Baby Boomers.
Hey everybody, it's John Ferrantino and welcome to Bitchin Baby Boomers. Yeah. We got a great show for you today. I think we have to mention a little moment of silence. Charlie Watts passed away of the Rolling Stones. Legendary guy. I just heard a quick story that Mick once called him his drummer. He was so upset he went back to his room, walked down the hall, ran past Keith Richards, and rapped on Mick's door and punched him in the face. Walked back, and Charlie said, "What'd you do?" He goes, "I punched him in the face." And that's the kind of guy he was. He says, people come to see Mick do his little dance. They come to see Keith play his guitar, but I'm the glue of the group.
See, actually,
speaking of the glue of the group, we got an amazing show for you today. We got Jeff Sherman's going to come on in a little while. And the glue of the group right now, the mentalism, the man who knows all, is Joe Silkey. What do you got for us? What happened to you this week, Joe?
Well, a good friend of mine from upstate New York in Gilboa, Mike Moorcout, sent us this interesting article about de Blasio. And Mike's got some comments about that.
What was the article? The article was that de Blasio is going to pay.
De Blasio said that we should pay criminals not to kill anybody.
Yeah. Pay him $1,000.
Right, $1,000.
Give me first of all, I mean, you're assuming that, that people who kill, most people are not out there just planning murders and stuff like that. Most people are, they're like casual murderers. It's a spur of the moment kind of thing. It's not like, hey, I think I'm going to murder this weekend. It's like, yeah. So how are you going to offer somebody money to do something? It's a crime of passion, unless you're getting paid to murder. Now, if you're a paid murderer, trust me, they're making a lot more than $1,000. Their equipment, just my shovel. I got more than $1,000 worth of shovel in the. I mean, people who do that kind of stuff have that kind of equipment, And then you got your serial killers, and I don't think that's $1,000 isn't gonna, But I mean, most people are your weekend type murderers. They're not, it's like golf. Am I going to golf this weekend or murder? I can't figure it out. So, I don't know.
Weekend murderers?
Yeah, weekend. It's a casual. It's a hobby, like a murderist. I'm a hobbyist.
Well, you figure that most murderers don't have jobs. So do they have to claim that on their unemployment?
Wait, what do you mean, man? What do you mean they don't have jobs?
They have to list that killed Joe Blow September 10th. All right, by the way, that was Mike Grief, who was just so bent out on murder, I didn't even get a chance to introduce him. He's the dean of the Clown College. And then we have our Yoda. We have our Yoda, the tech guy, the man who makes this thing run like a well-oiled ship. We have Craig Mitchell.
Yoda, I am, yes.
My own advice will I take on. No, I can't do that. has taught you well.
Very good.
Very
good.
What's up with you, Greg?
I'm feeling dark today. I'm wearing
I've got a bone to pick with, I guess a woman named Zoe. I drive rideshare as my survival job, and I drove last Friday for a rideshare company, and I had a great day, and I got home and I got an email that I had been suspended off the platform because I got a complaint that I wasn't wearing a mask. And here's the thing. If you know me, I wear a fucking mask when I'm showering, all right? Seriously. I wear a mask from the moment I leave my house to the moment I come home, and I don't take it off even to drink water. But I complained about her first because she fell asleep in the back of my car on a half-hour trip. Her mask was off, and I couldn't wake her up. And you can't touch her. And I had to wake her up by clapping real loud, and she didn't even acknowledge my existence, and she complained that I wasn't wearing a mask.
You should get one of those little air foghorns.
You know what? I have them. I should do that. Time to get up. Don't worry about the tip. It's okay, you know. But she, I guess when she saw that I complained about her, because you get an email saying, "Hey, you violated, the rideshare's rules of service by not wearing a mask," and so she reported that I wasn't wearing one, and they suspended me. They wouldn't take a video because they couldn't tell me who she was because of her anonymity. But then 12 hours later, they saw that I complained about her, then she complained about me, and they took my side and they took it off my record. But man, people are just insane.
Oh, from now on, when I see people not wear a mask, I'm just going to start sneezing and coughing and go, "You don't need a mask." I'm with you. Who needs a mask?
Joe, besides being an amazing mentalist, he's also an amazing graphic artist and an animator. And I think he put together a little video.
Yeah. So I just want to say this is my opinion, and we're not trying to sway anybody. But
yes, we are. Yes, we are. At this point, yes, we are. This is a big thing. Roll a video.
Oh, hello, America. It's Uncle Sam here. And I just wanted to say, I know a lot of you are having trouble with this pandemic, especially when it comes to wearing your mask. So let me explain something to you about the mask. It does you absolutely no good if you wear it around your neck. You must cover your nose and your mouth. This way, it protects you and it protects the people around you. So, I'm fortunate enough to have Lady Liberty here to model the proper way to wear a mask. And I think if we all work together, we can lick this. So let's buckle up those masks, America, and let's give it a try. Thank you for watching and have a great day.
Lady Liberty, she was in my car.
Yes. Wear a mask. I'm from Florida. We have Ron Death Sentence as our governor who doesn't believe in masks. Wear a mask. Also, okay, we got too heavy. I got a joke for you.
I want to know why Uncle Sam only had one arm.
Yeah, what the hell? And why does his hand move with his chin? Does he have a problem?
And I think it's very weird that Uncle Sam's voice sounds a lot like Joe Silky's.
What?
I've been told that before. All my life I've been told. I sound like Uncle Sam.
All right.
Except Uncle Sam's lips move more in sync than Joe's do.
Yeah. All right. Here's a joke you can tell around the dinner table. How do fish get high?
I don't know.
They smoke seaweed.
Okay. Is that on a Dixie cup there, Joe? No.
Come on, that's funny. Seaweed.
Seaweed. Smoking weed.
Oh,
man.
So,
have anybody ever been to one of those dispensaries?
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, last time I saw the guest we have today was in a dispenser, but we'll talk about that later.
I'm sure he'll want to talk about that.
I've never actually smoked weed. Yeah, please, Mike Pinocchio.
Either have I.
I have. Let me show you a picture of the last time I smoked weed.
When do you look like Freddie Prinze?
Yeah, I put my foot in my mouth that day.
Okay, so I am a victim of the 60s, as you know. So, yes, I did my fair share of smoking weed. I said one day I think it's maybe time to cut back when I cleaned my ear with a Q-tip and resin came out.
When you start smoking your earwax, it's time to quit.
When your pee and seeds come out. That's
one of my best friends in the world who lives in Colorado. He was here in Florida and ran into my cousin, and he smoked some new pot and said, "That's it. I almost got killed. I can never smoke again in my life. That's it. I've quit after 50 years." So he went into this dispensary, and just out of curiosity, because they just opened it down the block, and the guy said, "You smoke?" And he goes, "Not anymore." And they go, "Why not?" And he goes, "Oh, man, it's too strong." He goes, "I had a really bad experience." And the guy goes, "How old are you?" And he goes, 71. He goes, "Oh, you need that old school weed." He took him in the back room and goes, "This is stuff you used to smoke without the seeds and stems." He goes, "It's like Mexican trash weed." He goes, "But you'll probably love it." So he goes, "And today is BOGO, buy one, get one free." So he said, so he bought like two, went home and said it was amazing. It was exactly the pot we used to smoke. So now he goes back every Wednesday on BOGO Day.
Meanwhile, all we used to do is complain about the old weed.
I know. However, the old weed used to be, I don't want to say that I smoked it for a while, but the old weed was $80 a pound. Of course, you got a shrub, and you got the whole shrub in a garbage bag, and it was like, when you got done, it looked like you could plant it. You could put it out in the garbage because it looked like you trimmed your garden or something.
I invented edibles. Did you know that?
Yes, you did.
I did. I had an ounce of pot in my car, and there was a cop behind me, and that's the day I invented edibles.
There you go.
Nice. I remember a story in the 60s. This guy I know was driving along, and a cop was pulled out behind him, and he had an ounce of weed on the front seat, and it was raining out, and he goes, "Yeah." He took it and he dumped it out the window while the cop was following him. So he pulls over, and the cop goes, "I'm pulling you over because I think you may have some drugs." And he goes, "I've got nothing." And he shows the empty bag, and the cop goes like this down the side of the car. And goes, "What's this?"
Yeah. See, I'm stupid. A cop comes up to me and he goes, "Do you have drugs on you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what do you want, man?" Oh, what do you need, dude?
Well, this whole drug thing back then, how's this for a segue? It was kind of white trashy.
Damn.
That was like a real Regis Philbin segue.
That gets the From Here to There award right there.
Does that mean we're going to show my
No,
old
we
commercial?
got a great guest, and I'm trying to wrap things up so we can bring him on.
All right.
So let's show Mike's video.
Yeah.
White trash. Okay.
Oh, take that out. It smells like shit.
Oh, fuck.
Has this ever happened to you? You have a load of beer cans, stolen car parts, drug paraphernalia, rib bones, and tattoo needles that could sink a landfill. And a regular trash bag can't hold that crap. It'll just break.
Clean that shit up. How are we gonna sleep on the floor, huh? And who's that asshole?
You need white trash bags. They're double packed to handle the type of garbage that only white trash can dish out.
Hey, this thing weighs a ton.
I told you your grandmother died.
Hey, look, it's not ripping or dripping or nothing.
White trash bags. In 1-ply, 2-ply, and how the fuck did you get it in their ply?
How the fuck did you get it in there?
You never told me your grandmother passed away.
By the way,
how old that is?
Before we go, I have to do a disclaimer. I looked up that de Blasio story and it's being, for some reason, only covered on Fox News and these right-wing newscasts. So I think there's a lot more to the story because it's when you put it in swope, it says it's fake news. But it's got some good jokes, so we're going to stick with that.
Before we move on, I wanted to point out that there's another celebrity who's having trouble with the new pot. And here he is.
All right, it's Carrot Top. Duh. Come see me at the Luxor every night.
He's having some trouble with it. Yeah.
Jeez. Remember when he used to look like the Wendy's kid? Now he looks like the Wendy's kid on crack.
Yeah.
All right. I shouldn't say that because he's a friend of mine and he'll never forgive me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like I said, we got a great show, and we're going to turn it over to Mike, and Mike's going to do the interview because they go way back. And let's hear from Mike Grief.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Hey, we have a really excellent guy. I'm so happy to have the guy here. He's not only, this guy wears a lot of hats. He's a writer, a producer, a director, music. He does it all. And believe it or not, whether you know it or not, his family has affected your family in one way or another. And you may not be aware of it. So let's welcome not only a very professional, but a good friend of mine, Mr. Jeff Sherman. Let's welcome Jeff. Jeff, put Jeff in the big square.
I tried to. He didn't. There you go.
There we go.
Hey, how are you, Jeff? Good to see you.
Doing great, Mike. How are you doing?
I can't complain. I'm still upright and sucking air. And like I said, we were talking about weed. It's so funny. Like I said, the last time I saw you was in a weed dispensary.
Yeah, but professionally.
Professionally, we weren't smoking.
No, well, a friend of mine, Sam, who ran a dispensary in Studio City, and he had an idea to do a pilot for a TV show about two guys who come and start working in a dispensary. So we actually shot there with real weed, and it was something. And Mike played I guess you were the landlord renting them this crappy space for their dispensary. It was great.
It was funny because actually, I've been sober for 25 years, and I remember walking into that place, and it was probably the first time I'd smelled like they were talking about the new weed, and it was like, whoa! I think I got a buzz just smelling it, but we go way back. I believe the first time I actually met you was Boy Meets World. My favorite casting directors, Steiner Block, Barbie Block, and Sally Steiner. Right. And that was I believe that was probably the first time we met was on
Boy. Yeah, I was one of the producers on that, and I remember that well. That was great. And Sally was wonderful.
Yeah. You do a lot of stuff. You write, you produce, you're a musician, director, all that stuff. What is your passion? What's your driving passion? Do you consider yourself a writer or a musician, a director? What is your main focus?
Well, there are two things. Music has always been a big passion for me, coming from my family and all that. My grandfather, Al Sherman, was a Tin Pan Alley songwriter. Oh, wow. By the time I was 4 or 5, he gave me piano lessons every Sunday.
Yeah.
So that was in my blood. And then, of course, my dad and uncle are the Sherman Brothers, who wrote all the big Disney scores in the 60s and stuff after that, too. Tons of stuff.
I was going to get to them and say your grandfather actually had a few hits. I remember it was because I've seen the documentary, and we'll get to that, too, that you want to be a football hero. Your grandfather had quite a few hits. He
wrote that?
Yeah. My grandfather was a Russian Jewish immigrant who escaped, the Cossacks, came to America, had a thick Russian accent all his life, and he was he's considered one of the top 10 Tin Pan Alley songwriters of the time. Wrote some great American classics like "You Got to Be a Football Hero" and "Potatoes Are Cheaper, Tomatoes Are Cheaper, Now's the Time to Fall in Love." And
wow, that's great.
There's scores and scores of them, but
oh my God,
he was wonderful. So
that's what I'm saying. It's like people don't realize, but your family has affected the psyche of at least definitely the baby boomer generation for sure, and before, with all the incredible music. It's now, like I said, and it runs through your blood, and I know your son is a musician. It's it's a fan. Is there anyone in your family that's not? It's like
both my sisters were professional singers. They used to sing on sessions. Do you remember that song the Carpenters did called "Sing a Song"?
Oh, sure,
yeah.
Little kids saying "La la 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 la."
No,
yeah.
Who sadly passed away 2 years ago, but she was one of the La 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 kids, and she did a lot. And then what else? I don't know.
It's just so funny. It's just so funny. It's like they're not just songs. They're songs that are so recognizable and so iconic. You know what I mean? It's not just like where someone goes, "Oh, I wrote a song," and you go, "Oh, yeah, I think I heard that." You know, it's like who hasn't heard "I Want to Be a Football Hero"? Or, you know,
and you brought it up. So I mean, like also, and here's a song that you probably wouldn't know that I know since you brought up your dad and your uncle. That song that was "You're 16, You're Beautiful." Wasn't that one of their first hits? Was that one of their first hits? Right?
Yeah, they recorded that, and Johnny Burnett originally recorded it. It's the one that they used in American Graffiti, and that original.
Yeah.
And then when I was 16, ironically, Ringo Starr recorded it. It's kind of a funny story because my dad came home and he said, "Oh, great news! One of the Beatles is recording You're 16." I said, "John?" He said, "No." I said, "Paul." He said, "No." Ringo. I said, "Oh, okay." But it turned into one of their biggest hits.
It was like a big hit. Yeah, it was huge hit.
And Paul McCartney actually played kazoo on that, and Harry Nilsson sang backups on that recording.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you're like say your dad and your uncle, because I've seen the documentary, and actually I watched another first half of it last night just to freshen up a little bit, because I mean, and to anyone listening, anyone watching the show, you have to see this documentary. It's called The Boys. I know it's on Amazon Prime. It's on Disney Plus, right? I mean, it's incredible. It is the story of the Sherman boys who wrote all the score. Now, they started, I know, writing music for Annette Funicello, right?
Right. Well, they had written, they were sort of popular songwriters in the 50s. They wrote a few things like You're 16, which was a moderate hit, but they struggled a lot. And they wrote a song called Tall Paul, if you remember that song. And originally one of the other Mouseketeers recorded a Judy Harriet, her name was. And the Disney Music Group heard the song, and Walt wanted to and that was like the most popular of the Mouseketeers. And so he wanted her to record it. So she recorded it, and then they started coming to my dad and uncle. So they wrote Pineapple Princess. They wrote most of Annette's big hits. And then Disney kept hearing these songs and how versatile these guys were, because they wrote all the songs for Hawaiianette, Italianette, all these different albums they did. And he said, "Who are these guys? I want to meet them." So they came in, they came to the studio to meet Walt. And they didn't know they were actually going to meet Walt Disney. They thought they were just coming in for a meeting. And they thought they'd have to pay for parking on the lot, on the Disney lot. And they come in sort of hat in hand. And Jimmy Johnson, who was the head of Disney Music at the time, said, "Come on, guys, Walt wants to meet you." And Walt Disney, and they were terrified, because suddenly they're walking into the guy's office. And he didn't believe they were brothers, because in show business, there are a lot of guys who call themselves the something brothers.
Right.
I mean, at that time, when you see the documentary, they kind of looked almost like twins. And they told him to write a song for Annette for this movie. I think it was a TV movie called The Horsemasters. So they wrote this thing called Strummin' Song, which we have in the documentary, a little clip of it. And Walt was kind of upset because he thought they were coming in about this thing, The Parent Trap, the Haley Mills movie. And so he's kind of like, he listens to that first song, and my uncle plays it on his piano, and he goes, "Yeah, that'll work. Here's my story that I want to tell you about. It's about these twin sisters that meet at summer camp." And they're like, "So, okay." And they didn't realize, they were kind of upset because Walt kind of said to them, "Oh, that'll work." And as they're walking out with Jimmy Johnson, my dad was kind of pissed. He goes, "That'll work? What's wrong with this guy?" He goes, No, that's like his highest compliment. And you guys don't realize you just got a song placed in one movie, and he hired you to do another one. And suddenly they were doing this. And this continued for a couple, they came in and they wrote the song "Let's Get Together" and a couple other songs for that movie.
Wow.
And after they played that song in the second meeting, I think it was, Walt walked over to his bookshelf, and on the bookshelf is a little red book. And he handed it to him. He goes, "Do you know what a nanny is?" And my dad said, "Yeah, a goat." And, no, it's a British nursemaid. And my dad said, "Okay." He goes, "Look, read this and tell me what you think." So that was Mary Poppins, and they read it, and my dad read it to me as a kid, and my uncle told me recently, I had lunch. My uncle's still alive. He's 93. I just had lunch with him about 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And so they read the book out loud to each other, and they came up with not only sketches of about 5 or 6 songs for the movie, like I think they had Jolly Holiday and a little bit of Supercalifragilistic and a couple of the other ones, but they also wrote an outline from the book as what the movie could be. And Walt they asked for a half hour to meet with him, and they came in, and he canceled all his meetings for the afternoon. He listened to the songs, he heard their pitches on the script, and then he said, it was getting dark outside, and Walt said, "Play that Bird Lady song again." So they played "Feed the Birds."
Wow.
And Walt turned around and said, "You guys like to work, don't you?" And they said, "Yeah, Mr. Disney." And they weren't supposed to call him Mr. Disney, only wanted to be called Walt. And he turned around, and on his desk he had 2 contracts prepared for them, and they became the first and only staff songwriters at Disney.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were prolific. I mean, they, like I said, people don't realize. Now, it's like you watch a movie today, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, things like that, all these Marvel movies, and they have the music, and the music really makes the movies. But it's like those old Disney movies were the beginning of that I remember. My first memories, was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Winnie the Pooh, The Jungle Book. And it was like, who would have, they were so prolific in their writing and just the way that the music is just absorbed. I honestly think that, I know they made the movie recently, Saving Mr. Banks. Mm-hmm. And I think that somebody should, I'm going to call Tom Hanks after the show and say, "Listen, man, what you got to do is you got to make the movie about the Sherman boys," because I think they missed. I mean, you talk about, and it's all in the documentary. I really see people should see it, about your father and your uncle and the differences. And I know they didn't get along great. They had and I know that your father was in the war.
Yeah. And
he was injured. And I know, so you had like your uncle who's more upbeat, kind of, happy go. And your dad was a little darker. I was going to ask, do you think that maybe his experience in the war is what made him a little darker?
At Disney Studios, they called them my Uncle Tigger, and they called him Dad Eeyore. It's more complicated than that, and it's more nuanced because they both have, my dad passed away in 2012, but they both have their idiosyncrasies, and they're just very different guys. But yes, my dad enlisted in the Army at 17, and was in the second wave at Normandy. Fought his way through Europe and was the first American and the only Jewish guy in his battalion that liberated Dachau.
Wow.
So he saw everything, and it motivated him he was a poet and an artist. He painted and all this stuff, but it motivated him to want to do something for humanity when he came back. So, and my uncle, it's funny, in the documentary we talk about it too. By the way, the full title is The Boys, the Sherman Brothers Story, because a lot of people look up The Boys and it's that superhero dark series. And it's not, they're not those guys.
No. I was wondering.
But my uncle served as well, but at Fort Ord in California, and his main job was leading the band. So that kind of tells you a little bit about the differences. Yeah. He ended up going to the same school at the same time, Bard College in New York. And my uncle was going to be a symphonic composer, and my dad was going to be a poet or a novelist. And one day my grandfather comes up to their apartment that he was paying for. It was over dry cleaners. He slams the door open. He goes, "I'll bet you two geniuses couldn't write a song that some kid would spend his lunch money on." They were a little bit like, "What?" So they took the challenge and they wrote a bunch of songs. And then they finally wrote a song that Al, my grandfather, liked called Gold Can Buy Anything But Love. He goes, that's got a hook. That's great. Go to Vine Street, which was sort of where all the music publishers were in Hollywood. And they walked up and down the street and sold the song. And it was recorded, and that started them off. And then my uncle went away in the service in the 50s. And my dad wrote with other people, and then they came back together. And ironically, the song that was their breakthrough song was "Tall Paul."
Tall Paul.
So with the Annette song. So and they ended up being exclusively writing partners from then on.
Did your dad live in London?
Yeah, my dad moved. My dad loved London because he was shot in the war. About a week after he liberated Dachau, he got hung up on some barbed wire in a field, and a machine gun fire went and hit his knee. Wow. And he thought he was going to die. And they sent him to a hospital in London, in England. And he recovered there and he fell in love with it. And he was an English major in college at Bard and fell in love with English literature. He just loved it. And so he always had an affinity for it. So when my mom passed away in 2001, it was funny. Wendy, my wife, Wendy Liebman, the comedian who you had on before, she was on the Letterman show, and we went to New York, and I came back, and I see my dad's got his house. They're packing up his house. And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, I'm moving to England. That's the way my dad was. He was very spontaneous. He goes, next Wednesday. I'm like, okay. Wow. So he moved. In the last 10 or 11 years of his life, he spent in London in his favorite place, overlooking Hyde Park, and it was just sort of a dream of his. So
we were just talking about Hyde Park and the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Crazy. What do you think was the most famous song that they wrote? I mean, they're all famous, but I mean, what was like their favorite or their biggest, I guess?
Well, I think the most famous would have to be It's a Small World After All that you hear at Disneyland, and you can't get it out of your head afterward. But
I know. I used to have nightmares that I would be stoned.
Well, I want to impose upon you and ask you. Now, I know there was a song that you inspired.
Yes, well, inadvertently. My dad and uncle, as we mentioned, did the score for Mary Poppins, and it took like 3 years for them to get it developed. And part of that, you see in Saving Mr. Banks, a lot of that movie was fictional, by the way.
Right.
But I mean, Disney never flew to England to woo her. I mean, that was just like so made up, but that's okay. It was a good movie anyway. And it was fun to see the guys play my dad and uncle. But so they'd written all the songs for the movie, and they were in pre-production. They'd done all the storyboards, the little drawings of all the scenes. Right. Walt was an animator, so he would do it just like you would do an animated movie. And he had a room full of, the Cherry Tree Lane and the Jolly Holiday and the rooftops of London, all these things. So anyway, so my dad and uncle were looking for who was going to play Mary Poppins. They were considering like Betty Davis and all these other actresses at the time. Nobody was exactly right. And my
Betty Davis.
Yeah.
It's like, here's a coat hanger, little kid. Eat your medicine.
So it's going to be a bumpy ride.
So my dad and uncle were both watching the Ed Sullivan Show, and Julie Andrews came on with Richard Burton, and they were singing songs from Camelot. And they went, who is this? And they told Walt about her. Walt flew out, saw Camelot, went backstage, and invited her to come to Los Angeles. She hadn't done a movie yet. So she comes out with her then husband, and they listen to all the songs. And she loves everything. She's very enthusiastic. But she goes to Walt. Their favorite song is a song called Through the Eyes of Love. And they thought that was their magnum opus at the time. They thought that was it. And Julie privately goes to Walt at the end. She goes, I love all the songs, but that Through the Eyes of Love song, it doesn't really feel like Mary Poppins to me. Mm-hmm. So Walt goes to their office, and they're all buzzing because Julie's interested. And he says, guys, we're not going to do that song. Why don't you come up with something a little more like Mary Poppins? And I'm like, oh, God. And they're really depressed. And they championed her, and they're like, oh, great. So they kick around ideas. They thought a stitch in time saves 9 or some kind of a catchphrase. Everything sucked. So my dad came home, and, it was like he usually came home about 5:30. He was home when I got home after school. So and the shades were down, and he had a scotch about, a big one. And he's sitting there just kind of thinking. And he said, "So how was your day?" And I told him, I said, "Dad, at school today, we had the polio vaccine." And he said, "Well, I have to tell you, when I was a kid, I was a big kid. And when they would bring in the shots in the doctor's office on those trays, I don't know if you guys remember that, the baby boomers,
the metal trays.
Yeah, with all the booster shots.
Yeah.
Bad enough that there'd be 4 of them or something. And I was shot phobic. So I would usually, I did it twice I can remember, and then I was told not to, but I'd flip the tray over and they would spill all over the floor. And while the nurse was distracted, I'd run out. And we lived in Beverly Hills, and I'd go hide somewhere in Beverly Hills till it was dinner time. So my dad was shocked I let somebody, do that. So he said, "You let somebody give you a shot at school?" I said, "No, Dad, they gave you this little cup and they put a sugar cube in it, dropped the medicine in it, you just ate it." And my dad started like shaking his head and looking at me and he went over to the phone, told my uncle to go back to the office, and they wrote, "A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down."
That's just amazing. I mean, that's great. That's such a great story. And see, and these are the background stuff that nobody would ever know if you didn't talk about it and you didn't, I like I said, I can't stress enough to people go see the documentary. And I just want to circle back too. Now I know you're working on some other projects. Do you want to? What are you working on? Now I don't want to make this all.
What are you working on that you can talk about?
That you can talk about. I don't want to make this all about your dad.
My daughter's a playwright. Every time we interviewed her on the other show, she goes, "I can't talk about that. I can't talk about that." I go, "What is she in the witness protection program?"
Well, all I can tell you, Mike, that I can talk about a little bit is you brought up something earlier, and you'll be happy down the line. But some of the stuff I'm doing, I'm writing a book called Spiraling Upward, which is a series of short stories about. I've lived sort of a Zelig life. I've met and been in weird places and met celebrities, and through my job and through just life itself. Right. And it's really about the journey of life, and even if I think as I look back at all these scripts back here, but I've written a lot of scripts. I must have written 100 screenplays, and I can't count the TV episodes and all that stuff. And I'm about 1 for 10 getting them made.
I know you've had some big successes. I mean, you wrote and produced the Au Pair. You talk about Mary Poppins, but did that inspire the Au Pair series that you wrote?
Absolutely. The Au Pair series. It was funny. I'd written it as a feature film, and there were some nibbles on it, but nobody came around. And one day, I get a phone call from this woman. And she says, "Is Au Pair available?" I thought it was one of my friends like digging me, And I said, "Yeah, I've got 12 in a box. How many do you want?" I said, "Who is this?" She goes, "This is Cheryl Saban." It sounded sort of familiar. She goes, "Yeah, my husband owns Fox Family, and we're looking to do a feature film. And I just wanted to know if the rights were available." And so I went and met with her, and Cheryl became my writing partner. We rewrote the script together. And Chaim got involved, her husband, Chaim Saban. And they're famous for the Power Rangers and all that stuff. He's a big producer, mogul, billionaire. Anyway, so we made the movie, and when it came out, it was the #1 highest rated TV movie of the week and the highest one ever on Fox Family. And then this is kind of a funny story. So I have no idea. You don't know when you put it out there how it's going to go. So it goes, and I get all these phone calls from people. "Do you know what the numbers you got on that movie?" I said, "Ooh." And I get a call from Cheryl, and she says, "Hey, Jeff, can you come by Saban Entertainment tomorrow morning? Because Chaim wants to say hi and thank you." I said, "Okay." So I go, and it was this big building on Wilshire Boulevard. And I go. I've been there a couple times before. And I go and I see Cheryl in the lobby. I said, "So what's this?" He's just going to say thank you. She goes, "No, he wants you to pitch him Au Pair 2. I'm like, "What?" So I get in there, and thankfully he's on the penthouse. So I had about 12 floors to think of what the second movie would be. And usually I labor over this stuff and I do outlines. And so I'm going up, and I'm just going. She's like talking to me. I'm just thinking, I don't know. I didn't think of it being a thing. And we get up there, and I walk in, and I pitched something to him. He goes, "Great, it's greenlit. like the easiest pitch I ever had in my life. It's
Wow.
the true elevator pitch. I got in the elevator, and by the time
Then you gotta go home and remember what you pitched.
and then the funny thing was, years later, Haim sold Fox Family to Disney, and it became ABC Family.
Right.
And so I get a phone call, and they wanted me to do a third one, so I did a third one. So there are as many au pair movies as there are Godfather movies. But as far
as many people get killed in each, no, I'm just.
It's a little known fact. But currently, I'm writing my book. I've been putting out some of my original music lately. You asked me about my passions, and music's probably my main passion. But walking in the footsteps of my grandfather and certainly my father and uncle, it was something. On Boy Meets World, I would slip a couple songs in, and I did one of the first Disney Channel series called The Enchanted Musical Playhouse with the Osmond family and with Disney and a company called Centerpoint, which no longer exists. But and I hired my dad. That's actually a picture from it. Jimmy Osmond was my partner on it. And that's my dad and uncle. And that's me when I was young and I had more hair. But so we did those. And I sold it by saying, I'm going to bring in the Sherman Brothers. This is a funny story. So the way that show evolved, the Enchanted Musical Playhouse, was I went to this big party on the back lot at Disney when they used to have a back lot before they tore it all down. It was all the Western streets and the different things. And they were launching the Disney Channel. So I had this idea to do children's stories as little mini musicals, like little half-hour musicals. And so I said to my dad, I said, who runs the Disney Channel? He goes, that guy over there. So I walked over to him. I said, hi, I'm Jeff Sherman, Bob Sherman's son. He goes, oh, nice to meet you. I said, I have an idea for a series for the channel. He goes, great, come in next week. So I go in and I start pitching this idea, half-hour children's stories set to music. And they're like kind of interested. And I said, and I'm going to get the Sherman Brothers to write the songs. And they said, how much is that going to cost us? Well, I never, as much as I talked to my dad about the creative side of the business, I never asked him his business side of the business. I just didn't do that. So I had no idea what he would get for a song. So I said, well, it's going to cost you $5,000 a song. It was like Disney. They pulled out the contracts. Great, sign it.
Yeah.
And I go back home. And I called my dad. I said, great news. I sold the show and we're going to be working together. Great, great, great. And I said, Dad, I got you $5,000 a song. And there's a silence.
Oh, boy.
He says, yeah. He said, yeah, I think I wrote a song for $5,000 in 1951. And my uncle, who would write for free, didn't mind, but my dad was more the businessman.
Yeah.
So he was cool. And it was kind of a side story to it, but a little window into my dad and uncle and the dysfunction there. So the first one we decided to do was the Velveteen Rabbit. If you have kids, you know that story. It's the little rabbit that comes to life through a little boy's love. And so I said to my dad, I said, how do I work with you? And he said, well, get 3 copies of the same version of the book, give one to me, and then drop one at your uncle's house, and you keep one. I said, I don't know where Uncle Dick lives. And the odd thing was he lived 7 blocks away from us, but I'd never been to his house. That was how deep the dysfunction was in our family.
Wow.
So I go to it, and I knew him really well from the office. I would always go by their office and listen to the songs. He played me everything. But I never went to his house before. So I get to his house, and he opens the door a sliver, and I hand him the book. He goes, thank you, and the door closes. I went, okay. So about a few days later, they had an office on Sunset Boulevard, just off Sunset Boulevard, where the Larry Flint Hustler building is now, across from the old Tower Records things. And I went up there, and I'd been there a million times, and I'm all excited. I'm going to be working with the Sherman Brothers, and I've done stuff with, talked to them, but I never worked with them. So, and I'm going to write the script. I'm going to write the song. So I walk up the stairs. I walk in, and it's the tensest. You could smell tension in the air. My uncle's sitting at the piano like this. My dad's at his desk like this. And I walk in like, I think they're pissed about the $5,000 a song. I don't know what it is. And I said, so how's everybody doing? And my dad goes, let's just jump into it. Okay.
Okay.
And so nobody says anything. So I'm sitting in a chair in the middle of the room it was a pretty big office. I'm between them. So I opened my book and I'd circled, some ideas. And I said, well, I think the first song might come in on page 2 where my uncle goes, that's the stupidest fucking idea I hope I didn't score. Stupidest fucking idea I've ever heard in my entire fucking life. And I'm like, wow. He never talked to me like that before. And then my dad he had this pinky ring, a little gold ring, and he hits it on his glass top desk. I thought he cracked it. He was so angry. And he stabs it and goes, Dick, you couldn't talk to me like that. You could not talk to my son like that. Wow. And so my uncle stands up and he hits the piano. He goes, yeah, if he's going to work with us, he's going to work with us the way we work. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell?
Wow.
And they start coming at each other. They were both in their 50s and big guys. And I'm holding them apart. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a disaster. How am I going to get through this? And they were just arguing over me. And suddenly my uncle goes, oh, okay. And he goes back over and he sits at the piano and he starts playing this happy little melody. And my dad looks at me, sighs, goes to his desk, pulls up his pad that he always wrote on. And they started writing a song in front of me called Ribbity Rabbity Run. So that's where. So I was mortified. I thought like I completely screwed up this writing team. And I get home afterward. I'm still shaking. I've been there for about 2 hours, and it got tense again a couple times. And I called my dad and I said, "So, Dad, I'm really sorry. I don't know what I did." He goes, "Oh, Jeff, we call that Wednesday. We fire up to work." And I thought, I collaborate quite a bit. And if it gets like that, I don't collaborate with that person. So I don't really understand it, but that was there. It's partly they were siblings, partly.
I can imagine how crushing that would be. It's like, here's your idols, your uncle and your dad, and your uncle's like, what? That's the dumbest fight. I mean, my soul would have collapsed in on itself, So.
Sure.
Can I ask
I guess it worked. I guess it worked for them.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question from your own personal perspective. How did it feel being a young man? And I would assume you met Walt Disney.
Yes.
Was it a big deal for you, or was you just like the guy that your dad's worked for?
Well, I knew he owned Disneyland because I was kind of, I was born in 1957. So I met him in 1960, 61. And I was a pretty little kid, but I knew he owned Disneyland. I knew he owned the studio, and he was my dad's boss. But beyond that, and I watched him on the Sunday show and all that stuff. So he was sort of iconic and bigger than life. But he was really personable, the sweetest man, really wonderful. Every time he saw me, he remembered my name.
Oh, wow.
And I can tell you one funny story if you don't mind me taking a little segue here.
Absolutely.
But, so my dad had read me the books. And he would come home and they devoted that whole, everybody thinks that the movie was shot in England, but it was all shot in Burbank, California on the Disney lot and sound stages. So, my dad one day said, he'd always tell me like, we have wizards and magicians making these amazing things. Wait till you see what they're doing. And I'm, so excited. I think they're really wizards and things going on, right? Pretty old. So he goes, do you want to come see it? You want to come take a day off? So I said, yeah. So he takes me out of school and we go down and we go to all the sound stages. Every sound stage at the studio was devoted to Mary Poppins. So on stage 2 where we did Boy Meets World the first 2 years, the big sound stage there, that was Cherry Tree Lane. And another one was the merry-go-round horses against a yellow screen is how they shot that. And
was this Warner Brothers?
No, it's Disney Studios.
Disney Studios. I'm sorry, of course, Disney.
And So we go around to all these things, and I got to watch them shoot a little bit of the Tea Party on the ceiling, when they're floating up in the air under the table.
Oh, wow. Edwin, yeah.
Yeah, and I meet everybody. I met Julie Andrews in her makeup robe. He goes, "This is Mary Poppins." I'm thinking, she don't look like, she was just like not makeup or anything. And I'm like, well, nice to meet you. So I'm just a little, I take everything literally. So my dad's walking me back, and my thing I was mostly looking forward to was at the Coral Room, which was the executive dining room at Disney. They made the best tuna sandwiches. I was a tuna sandwich freak, and I every time I went, that was like the destination. So he's taking me. I'm all excited. We walk in, and Walt Disney was aware of everything that went on at the studio at the time. He knew people said that he stayed up at night after everybody went home and went around and checked on what people were working on, so he could come in and just pinpoint it. He was just amazing guy. And he sees me there with my dad, and he'd heard that I was coming to look at the sets, I guess. And he comes and he said, and he leaves the guys he's having lunch with, and he says to me, "So, Jeffrey, I understand you took a look at our sets for Mary Poppins today. What'd you think?" And I'm holding my dad's hand. And I said, "They're okay, I guess." And my dad's hand went limp. He said something wrong. And Disney goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know." And he says, "You come with me." And I thought I was never going to get to go to Disneyland again. I thought I was in trouble. And he takes me by the hand and leads me back to the closest soundstage, which was the rooftops of London where they shot Stan. And there are workmen hammering, and it's, and the work lights are on. And I'm looking at it. He goes, "So what's wrong with this?" I said, I just don't think anybody's going to believe it. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, he says, I've had artists go to England and take photographs of the real, this is what it looks like. I said, "Yeah, but it's on the ground and no one's going to get it. It's going to," and he starts laughing at me like I'm the stupidest little kid, but nicely, and he leans down next to me and he does the camera frame with his fingers like this. He goes, "All the camera is going to see is this. And they're going to believe that that's the rooftop on top of the building. And that's called movie magic. And you can never tell your friends." And I remember that started my mind going like, "Oh, that's such a cool idea that it's just what you choose to shoot." And I think that really started me wanting to be a filmmaker.
Oh, that's amazing.
He takes me back to the commissary, and my dad's sitting. There was a writer's table with A.J. Carruthers, my uncle, and a couple of the other guys, where we'd always sit. And my dad was having a drink. They served alcohol. My dad was having a drink. I think he thought he was going to get fired. And Disney just laughs, and he tells him what happened, and they all start laughing. And so my dad was relieved it was all okay. But he was he's so maligned in the world, and there was nobody, more wonderful. I mean, my dad and uncle he opened their minds. They were just writing, you're 16, and he had them start thinking as storytellers. And that changed their whole life. So
that's so wonderful to hear, man. Yeah.
So you said you're writing a book about spiraling up because you have a lot of crazy little stories about your life and stuff. Do you have one you want to share, or can you talk about that? Or
a couple of these are in there. Yeah. It's not all about my dad. It's mostly about just me with different things. I had a funny meeting. The first meeting I had in Hollywood, I had a writing partner named Doug Grossman. We wrote 5 projects together. We wrote Up the Creek together. We did some other things. And but our first meeting, when we'd first gotten signed by ICM, our agent Dan Petrie Jr., who went on to Beverly Hills Cop and a bunch of other stuff. But before that, he'd been an agent there. And he said, "Guys, do you ever watch Mannix?" Yeah, sure. He goes, "Well, Mike Connors has a book that he's optioned, and he's looking for writers to adapt it." So I said, "Well, can we get the book?" He goes, "I have 1 copy, and the meeting is tomorrow." So Doug was a faster reader, so he read it first and came over on his motorcycle and gave me the copy. And I stayed up all night reading it. And we talked in the car on the way there. We went to Mike Connors' house up in the hills. And he opens the door. It's like, I think it was like 9:30 or 10 in the morning. He opens the door and he takes us into his living room that overlooks his pool, and there's a bar there. He goes, "You boys want a scotch?" I'm thinking, in the morning? Not me. And he goes, "I'll have one." So Doug had one. And so he goes, "Tell me what you think about this story." And so we start pitching, and he's loving it, and he's loving what we're pitching. And we hadn't really pitched or anything at that point. We were just, we'd done a couple things. But so we finish, and he goes, "And how old do you see this main character in this?" He wanted to play the lead, right? And I look at him and I go, "I think he's about 50. And his face went blank. And Doug looks at me like I'm out of my mind. And I went, "What?" And he goes, "Well, boys," and he just takes us and leads us back to the door. He ushers us out. "Well, boys, thanks for coming by." Closes the door, right? So I said, "Doug, that was great." He said, "Jeff, it's not going to happen." I said, "What are you talking about?" Right? So we drive right to ICM, and we go up to Dan's office, and he's just laughing. He's just like, 50? He said, "You never tell." I said, "How old is he?" He goes, "He might be 50, but you tell him he's 40. And I learned I've never made that mistake again. Just and go 10 years back. So that's.
I love those meetings. Like when I did this audition once for a game show host, and the script was so terrible. It was obviously I'd gone to comedy clubs, but they had mixed all the jokes up, right? So I had to read it, and it was terrible. And then I said to the director, who I said, "Can I show you how this should be done?" And I did it the way the joke should be done. And they're all laughing and everything. And I go, "Who writes this crap?"
Oh.
And he goes, "I did." And I went, "Thank you. I guess I won't be hearing from you." I walked out.
Oh, man. Well, I'm glad we circled back to your career, because I didn't want to make this all about your dad and your uncle, because you've had such an amazing career. And you talk about the shadow that you had to get out of to do the things you've done. I mean, like, some people like me, my father was a warehouse manager. It wasn't much of a shadow I had to step out of. But, for you to do you feel also that some of the things that you're doing or that you did, I never associated. Did you think there was the name that helped you out, or it was just basically, because I didn't even know who your dad and your uncle were when we met, and all the things we've done. I only found out in the last few years who they were.
Well, it's funny. Again, brings me to another story. It's a blessing and a curse. I wanted to be a professional songwriter. I mean, that was my first goal when I was a teenager, and I wrote, I think, 4 or 5 songs, and my dad paid for a recording session for me at Gold Star Studios, which is no longer there. It's now it's kind of a fast food place, but it was where they recorded everybody from the Beach Boys on, and it was a big studio. And I had about half the Wrecking Crew. I didn't know who they were at the time, but they were playing on my session. So I recorded these 4 songs, and I said, "What do I do now?" He goes, "Well, you should go take a meeting." And my dad had been working with the New York Times Music Publishing Company when they were doing this play called Over Here, this Broadway show with the Andrews Sisters. And he was friendly with the local president. It was on Sunset and Argyle, on this black building there that still exists. And so I go down, and the guy said, I said, "I've got 4 songs." He said, "I'll listen to 2. Play me your 2 favorites." And I said, "Okay." He was pretty nice, though. And I play him one song. He goes, "Great, I'll publish that. Let me hear the other one." And I thought, okay. And I played it. He said, "Okay, I'll publish both of those." And I'm 17 years old, and I think, I'm set. This is great. So I go home. I tell my dad, "That's great." And I got into BMI, Broadcast Music Incorporated. I was probably their youngest signee at 17 at the time. And, I thought my life is going. I told all my friends, I'm bragging. And so 6 months go by, and I hear nothing from this guy. I got the paperwork, signed it all. And I said to my dad, I said, "Well, what happens now?" And he goes, "Well, you got to keep on top of these guys because, he's your publisher." And he said, "Call and make another meeting." So I called and I set another meeting. I go up, and this guy this time is not nice. And he tells me, he's on the phone. He points to the chair. He says, like that. And I went, "Oh, this is going to be good." So I sit in the chair, and he said, "What?" After he got off his call. And I said, "You're publishing my songs, and I just thought I'd come and check in and see what's going on." He goes, "What do you need?" I said, "Well, you're my publisher." And he said, "Well, I only did that as a favor to your father." And I went from thinking I was the shit to feeling like shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And after that, that's why I shied away from music most of my life. I mean, I would slip stuff in, but it was never my main focus because even though I love it, and it's something that's comes to me. But the good and bad, I had a meeting at Disney once on a series, and they liked everything. And then one of the people, this was a Disney Channel, I think, and I worked for them a lot. I worked for Disney a lot myself. And at one point, this was an executive I didn't know. She looks at me and she goes, "Wait a minute, Sherman, are you like the son of one of the Sherman Brothers?" I said, "Yeah, Bob Sherman." She goes, "Well, you don't need this. Why are you even here?" And I went, "Well, I don't, so it's sort of a, but, I wouldn't have gotten the Enchanted Musical class unless I, sold them for $5,000 a song.
Right.
The doing the documentary, obviously, helped that I was related to the people that I was making a movie about. I made that with my cousin Greg, which was a wonderful experience because I didn't grow up knowing him.
Huh.
And now we're working a lot together. We're doing a bunch of stuff.
Well, and on the same lines, I mean, do you feel like, being who your parents were, did you see? Now for me, the stuff that your dad and your uncle, it was magic. I mean, I remember being a little kid and this and that. Was it the same for you? I mean, did you understand? I mean, like, was it, or because it was your
Tune in
dad's
next
job?
week to more
Was it just
Bitchin'
mundane
Baby
or whatever? I mean,
Boomers.
because I can pick almost any little kid and they'll tell you, Winnie the Pooh and Jungle Book and all this stuff. It was just, it added to the magic of childhood. And I just wondered, did you feel that?
Well, it was magical for me because I had the advantage. They wrote every day. They were writing for the theme parks and for, they wrote the Tiki Room song and they wrote this and that. I mean, half the songs you hear at Disneyland, I think they wrote.
Wow.
And they wrote TV shows, all the Disney Sunday movies, they'd write stuff for that. The Disney Wonderful World of Color, they actually even wrote that theme song. It was always, so every day my dad would come home and he had a habit. He had this closet that was a music closet with his stereo, the stack of stereo equipment. And if it was a tape or a record or a demo, an acetate record. And his habit was, before we'd have dinner, he'd come in and play the fresh catch of the day, whatever they had recorded, if it was a demo or an orchestral recording. So I heard all these songs from the very beginning, from the demos. And my dad would always start by, I don't think he knew left from right or something, because he would turn it all the way up and blow his speakers out and have to push the fuses back in and then turn it down. And then I'd listen with my two sisters and we listen. And, so I'd always hear those songs going, and I'd watch the progression of them. And one of my favorite things to do was going to the recording sessions. I always feel in the way on a set, but in a recording session, I felt really at home. And I would always ask to sit in with the orchestras because I loved Irwin Costle, who was their principal arranger conductor for quite a while. He did Poppins and Charlotte's Web and a bunch of a lot of the Disney movies. And Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And he would let me, I'd have to get permission from the conductor, but I'd like to sit near the violin section because it was something magical about that vibration in your chest and he would always have these great orchestrations with violins. And I was told not to cough, sneeze, or talk. So immediately as a little kid, I'd be there going, I'd feel that tickle in my throat. But I didn't, as far as the legacy of it, my dad was such a down-to-earth, humble guy. You wouldn't have known. You would have thought he was, he painted all the time, so he'd always have paint on his clothes. He looked like just a guy like that, or he'd work in the yard. He liked to plant things. And he painted and he was sort of a Renaissance man, did a lot of stuff. And he never was really a self-promoter. He just didn't do that. They never even had an agent, right. He was that way. So they had a wonderful manager named Mike Connor without the S. It's not Mannix. That would have done that for him too. But he, the first time I ever realized my dad was something bigger than just my dad. They'd won the Academy Awards, and that was cool. My dad came to school with the Oscars, and we got to show and tell with the Oscars, which was fun. And then there was an event, a daytime event, a concert series for little kids that they did at this Hollywood Bowl on Sundays during the day. And it was a classical concert, but this was after Poppins won the Oscars and all that. And there was a section, we were sitting in the box was there with my two sisters and my uncle and my dad. And it was a pretty packed house at the Hollywood Bowl with families there. And at a certain point in the concert, they went to do the Sherman Brothers thing, and the conductor got up. First of all, they played all this stuff, and everybody loved it. And he goes, and we have a special treat today. Before we move on in the concert, the two gentlemen who wrote these songs are here today with us. And they stood up in the box. It was the end of the concert. It was like the Beatles were there, and people swarmed us. And people were saying, "Can I get your autograph?" And I'm thinking, why do you want mine? I never understood. But we were there for at least an hour doing that. And the final tag to that is after Greg and I made the movie, the Boys, the Sherman Brothers Story, the documentary on them, we were flown to a bunch of film festivals all over the world. It was like in 50 or 60 film festivals. And we went to one in Annecy, France, a big animation festival that they have there every year. And we went, and it's an international audience. They come from all over Europe and to this thing. And so we were supposed to do a question and answer afterward. And they're about to screen the movie, and they're frantic. And they said we had to have French subtitles. And we had them made. We had a print made with French subtitles. Disney Studios sent the wrong copy of the film out for this thing, and they couldn't find them. And they said, well, and they delayed the screening for like 15 minutes. We're trying to frame it up and find it, and couldn't. And we finally figured, we called Disney, and they said, oh, we sent you the wrong one. So they decided to go on with it anyway. And it's one of these things where it's one after the other in this big, like a multiplex. And so it's a packed audience, and I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be a disaster. But, it didn't matter because everybody knew the songs, and they got the story. And a lot of people speak English anyway in Europe. After this, at the end of it, they said, well, unfortunately, we have to have our next film come in, so we're going to have to forego the question and answer thing. I'm thinking I flew to France for this. So when we walk out into the lobby, and there's almost everybody who had been in the theater stayed, and they were just in this semicircle around Greg and me, and they wouldn't let us go. And they all had international copies of, the Winnie the Pooh or Charlotte's Web or, the Aristocats or, Bed Down. They had everything in all languages, and they're all speaking and trying to communicate with us. And we're, like I said, I'm going to devalue this album if I sign it, but if you really want me to, so I did that. And I leaned over to Greg at a certain point, my cousin, and I said, look, it's a small world.
That's incredible. Well, I mean, I would have waited definitely. Like I said, I want to thank you for your time. You're just such an amazing person. You've had such an amazing career. Your family has contributed so much to the joy and happiness of the world. Like you just said, not just the United States, the world.
They're all just such iconic songs.
And just hearing about your dad's war record and liberating Dachau just made me love him that much more.
Amazing.
Because I'm with you. You're looking at a Russian Jew, so we've got that. But do you guys have any other questions for?
No, I am blown away.
Me too.
I really am.
It's been such an honor, and I just love you and Wendy so much. I want to thank you so much for being with us, and just thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great. Boy. Wow,
Mike, that was some guess. What an interesting stories. Thank you for getting him. And boy, the shows just keep getting better every week. And you can see us. You can see all of our back shows on the website, www.thebbbradio.com. Once you get there, it'll bring you to YouTube. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, become one of the members. And, you can't get interviews like this just anywhere.
I was going to say, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, because I think that's been some of the confusion. We keep saying subscribe, and I think people are joining the BBB page, which is great. But also make sure you subscribe on the YouTube to our YouTube channel. And you'll get to see all these great, incredible shows.
And for Instagram and Twitter, Joe will tell you.
It's the best place you can see us. And really, it's we tell it all. We got it all going on. And Craig will tell you.
And what would be the address? What would be the address, yeah?
All the behind the scenes secrets of the show.
That's it. All the behind
all
the
right.
scenes.
On Instagram it's Bitchin Baby Boomers, and on Twitter it's the BBB Radio Podcast.
He's a mentalist. He should have known that.
Yes.
Yeah, but I am a classic baby boomer. I don't.
All right, mentalist. What's coming up next?
What's coming up next?
Yeah.
Trick to Go.
Hey, look at that.
See you next week, everybody.
Eunice just held out the cue card.